take our breaths away with its glow.
Whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I'm Maria Thompson Corley. If that quote from Philippians resonated with you, stay tuned. I'd love to introduce you to intriguing, creative people whose light is making our world a lovelier place. Welcome to Finding Beauty.
Rita Smith-Wade-El is a professor of psychology and head of the African American Studies at Millersville University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But that is only the beginning. A devout Catholic who is a member of the Secular Order of Discalced Carmelites, she is also a board member and volunteer for Compeer Lancaster, and she is the chair of the Education Committee and also the vice president of the Lancaster branch of the NAACP. She's active with the Silvery Moon chapter, number 56 of the Order of the Eastern Star, and she is on the Social Justice Committee of the Sacred Heart Church, coordinates community meals at St. Mary's Church, and is an advisor of the NAACP College chapter at Millersville. She's won a number of awards for her work, including a Valiant Woman Award and the United Nations Office Human Rights Award. Those were in 2010. And that year she also won the Lancaster YWCA Racial Justice Award. Rita, I don't know if you've performed any certifiable miracles yet, but you seem to be on the fast track for canonization. So were you always called to help people, or was that something that developed later on in your life?
My father was one of those people that was always helping everybody. My mother was the practical one. So you had two sides. So my mother made sure that my father didn't give away everything, because we didn't have a lot. Because she couldn't read and write, and he only went to 8th grade. And she cleaned people's houses, and he was a cab driver and a security guard for the government, for the D.C. government. But I hung basically with my father. So I can't cook and I can't sew, and I'm just not domestic at all. So I picked up his whole concept that it was about service. And also, I graduated from high school in 66 and was in college 66 to 70 when it was about Black Power movement, serving the community, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of the environment I grew up in. So, yeah, I've kind of always liked being involved in service.
Okay. And were you always a part of the Catholic Church?
My family's been Catholic since slavery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you came up, as you said, you didn't have a lot, but you ended up with an Ivy League education, graduated from Columbia and UPenn. And I wondered, did you feel welcomed when you were there?
Well, remember, I'm also an activist. And when I arrived at Columbia, there were only 22 girls in my class, but we were the biggest class they had accepted of African-American females then. The senior class only had 4. And Barnard, Columbia University, the female half of it, was noted for its still apologizing to Dorothy Height. Back, I think, in the 30s, forgot when it was, Dorothy Height had got a scholarship, and she took the scholarship and been accepted there. And so the dean had her waiting outside her office all day and explained to her she was sorry, but that they had made a mistake and that she was the 3rd African-American accepted when they had an unwritten policy of no more than 2.
Wow.
We have scholarships named after Dorothy Height. We've made public apologies in the New York Times. They're still embarrassed about that. But when I was there were only 22 of us, and this was the period of Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, and so we were activists. We started an organization called BOSS, Barnard Organization of Soul Sisters. We spent our springs taking over buildings. It was also the time of SDS, Students for the democratic society. So there were also a lot of European American radicals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you did have to deal with things like they assigned us mentors. And my mentor was from Philadelphia, and she said, you know where I come from? Black people actually burn their hair with hot combs. Because she had never seen me do it, because my mother made me get a perm, which as soon as I could get away from my mother, I got rid of. But the issue was she did that, and then we noticed that they kept trying to peek in the shower. And remember, this was Barnum, it was the 60s, so things were very radical. So we approached them and said, listen, what is it? Are some of you gay? That's fine. So are some of us. Do you know what I mean? You know, what's going on here? And, you know, if that's the issue, we'll let you know who's gay and, you know, relationships as best you all see fit. Yeah. You know, not our thing. But what we found out is that some of them were from the Midwest, small towns, and they had been told we had tails.
Oh, wow. And
they wanted to see if we really had tails. Now, the ones that were from places like New York City and D.C., you didn't have that, and they were radical, and you felt kind of welcome, and you were down the street from Harlem. And like I said, there was a lot of activism, a lot of black power. We marched against the Vietnam War. And like I said, there was SDS. So there were these coalitions between black activist groups and white activist groups. So those people made us feel welcome. But the fact that we had to start the Barnett Organization of Soul Sisters, that we demanded there be some courses that were in what we call those days black studies. There were no African-American faculty at the school, so we jumped up and down about that, and they hired an adjunct in psychology, oddly enough. But I think he died the year I graduated. So I'm just saying, so it depends on what you mean by comfortable. For me, I had grew up in D.C. and had basically went to all black schools, because when I started school, schools were segregated in the nation's capital. And so when they desegregated schools, I didn't want to go to the white schools, so I went to all black schools. So my graduating class had 626 people. I think we had maybe a token white. We didn't tell him. But the school in 54 had been all white. But by the time we got there in 63, it was all black. Talk about white flight. Yeah. But we didn't know that we were supposed to be inferior. So the top two people in my graduating class got perfect scores on their SATs. Number 3 got 1550. I was number 10, and so I didn't do as well. I got like 1480 or something. Mm-hmm. And all the top 10 went to Ivy League schools. So the thing is, when I arrived and people started saying, well, you know, blacks don't do well on SATs, they're biased, we can't, and I'm looking at these people going, what? You know, what are you talking about? And remember, I grew up in D.C., which was more of a chocolate city than it is now. And so I grew up where I didn't see my color as an issue. I saw my class as an issue. Because in D.C. there were black doctors, black lawyers, black high up in government. All my teachers, you know, most of them were black. We had a black principal of the high. Do you know what I mean? So I grew up in a world where there were lots of prominent black people, though, you know, when I was really little, the buses were also segregated. But like I said, there were a lot of very prominent black people. It was D.C. But class and complexion, colorism, were issues. So I saw those more as my black block than color. Do you know what I mean? Just black. So when I arrived at Columbia, I said to my father, I've never seen this many white people in my whole life. Where do they come from? Now, I understood that whites were a majority, but nothing in my experience in D.C. made whites a majority. And later on, someone said to me, and I guess that was due to my upbringing, once a chair said to me that I act like I'm a white male. And part of that was I didn't see color as a barrier because everybody around me that were bright and making it were black. And I'm with my father, who never seemed to notice I was a girl. So the issue is, he was probably right. To him, I acted like a white male. You see what I'm saying?
But you know,
not at all submissive, not at all domestic, you know.
Well, I mean, I think that whole thing of just like, what does that mean? And it's sad that, you know, I knew exactly what you meant when you said I act like a white male. Like, that should be, you feel that you have a certain entitlement to certain kind of treatment, and there's no reason why you can't do whatever you set out to do. At least that's how I interpret it. There should be no barriers in front of you other than your own efforts or whatever, like your own lack of effort, that there's nothing holding you back, that artificial things that we always assume are holding us back. Yeah.
But even my style of interacting, when I first got to Millersville, my chair wanted me to teach a course that wasn't my area of expertise. And so when faculty meeting said, well, you'll be teaching this, I go, no, that's not my expertise. I don't want to teach that. He said, but I think you should. And I said, but I don't. And so he called me into my office and said, you know, I'm the chair. You can't talk to me that way. And I said, but Dr. Moyer talks to you that way all the time. You know, this was a white male. I said, he talks to you that way all the time. I said, you have to be white and male to be able to stand up. He never said anything else to me about what I said in faculty meetings ever again. But it was like he was quite willing to, I guess, have a debate in faculty member with what he considered his equal. But not me. And I noticed the females in the department didn't speak up a lot either. Do you see what I'm saying? But because they weren't, you know, they didn't
feel that they had that power or that they had that right. And, you know, I mean, obviously we're talking right now, or the thing that had been talked about before something else is pushing it off, was the Harvey Weinstein or whatever, and the treatment of women in Hollywood, and just the fact that women have felt this sense of having to give into or not talk about mistreatment, or, you know, being treated like property in some way. And it's cool that you, not from this generation really, but you never felt that way. I mean, and that just goes to show you. And I'm wondering, even growing up in the church, there are these scriptures about submission and things like that, but you never bought into that either.
Me and Paul had some issues, okay? Me and Paul had some issues, but I was always taught that Paul said that because of the particular time, and he said that the way, which was seen as a Jewish cult, the way was having enough problems, and by saying things like that made it more acceptable. But if you go back and actually read in detail, there were at least one church where obviously, probably more than one, where the leaders of that particular church, I forgot whether it was Corinthians or Philippians or which, was a woman. And they talked about that. You see what I'm saying? So I think people pick and choose certain sections to use against people.
No, certainly. They've been doing that for, I don't know, since it was written, I'm sure.
And people also don't read the second part of that. That I think the line is, you know, wives be submissive to your husband, but it also, husbands love your wives as if they were your own self, your own body.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And how would you treat yourself?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Somehow that doesn't get interpreted as meaning you do not objectify her, make her subjective. You see what I'm saying? People decide to ignore what the implications of the second half of that phrase is. And so I often remind people who think they're quoting the Bible, I go, okay, let's go and see what it actually said. What's the rest of that passage?
Because that's kind of a higher standard, I think, that you know, that's a very high standard that the husband is asked to maintain. You know, I mean, his side of the bargain is harder, really. Well, I don't know if it's harder, but it's a big a big thing. So I was going to say, I mean, obviously you have this history of fighting for what you think is right and battling for things that are important, and I know that it seems like you're treating cancer the same way, just battling and not being willing to back down. So it doesn't seem like it has slowed you down as much as one would think. I mean, I ran into your son a couple of weeks ago, and he said, no, he feels like you're like a shark. You have to keep moving forward. Where do you find the energy to keep such a full schedule with breast cancer that you've been battling for the last, how many years has it been?
Since 2008.
Okay, yeah.
And it's been, I guess my concept is that the worst thing you can do is stop, to kind of give up. That's why I think people die. But sometimes I say to people, death is going to have to catch me. I'm not going to slow down or wait for it. And my whole thing is, people go, well, is that a good Christian view? Don't Christians want to get to heaven? And I go, of course I do, but heaven's going to be there for eternity. What's the one? I mean, it's not like if I don't get there next week, it won't be an option for me. You know what I'm saying? You know, I mean, when people say, you know, I've got to, yes, I want to get to heaven. The issue is, at least as far as the theology, because I'm also a catechist. That's, I guess, the closest people would consider that is like a Sunday school teacher, but it's really a little more involved than that. And I'm a lector at church, a reader, and an extraordinary minister. But my concept is, I'm saying, like, don't we believe that there's this eternity? And if there's this eternity, what's my rush?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I assume, I definitely assume that if God wanted me to be gone, I'd be gone. But I don't see anything in the theology that says what you should do is not try to live as long as possible.
No, that's true. You're here doing good work, you know, and supporting a lot of causes. And how do you decide?
One of my problems is sometimes I think I don't decide. My sons get on me that I do too much. I try to do everything. Obviously, being African American and female, those are very important causes to me. I teach a course as a black woman, and sometimes people will ask me, well, what are you first, a female or an African American? And I tell them that the first morning I can wake up and say, this morning I'm African American but not female, or this morning I'm female but not African American, then I'll choose. But so far, every morning I wake up both, and therefore I don't think the question makes a whole lot of sense. One of my favorite books is called, the full title is All the Women Are White, All the Blacks Are Men, but Some of Us Are Brave, Black Women's Studies, because two of the movements that we would think would be in our best interest, the women's movement and the African American movement, has often neglected the black woman.
Yeah.
It's getting better in both movements, but they've often neglected that. That's why the book says, you know, all the women are white and all the blacks are men.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't take that perspective. I think that's very much my perspective. So probably I would say, obviously, those kinds of things, serving the church, the theology of Catholicism is very much faith and works, not just faith. That was one of the breaking points, do you see what I'm saying, of the Reformation. Not that we think works earn you heaven. Obviously, grace earns you heaven. But the issue is, my favorite passage, and I think it's Matthew, is when Jesus dividing the sheep and the goats. And, you know, you fed the hungry, you know, did you feed the hungry, clothe the naked, you know, that's my favorite, and I think that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
So I think I try to see where I think the most need is kind of there, and it just seems to be so much need.
Yeah. There's another poem that I read in an article that was your favorite, and it seems to just fit exactly. And I think it was Becoming Partners in God's Work by B.J. Hoff. And it asks, what can I do? And then answers, feed one, save one, shelter one, comfort one, love one.
I think the point goes, there's so many people hungry. What can I do? Feed one. There's so many people and they said, you've got to remember it all started with one. You know what I mean? Like Jesus Christ was one person. So to say, it's too overwhelming. You know what I mean? There's too many. What you do is one. Do you see what I'm saying? If you can make sure that one person is done. That's one of my favorite perspectives, that you can't go, I can't do it because it's too much, because I can't feed all the hungry people in the world. And no, you can't. But nobody's asking you to feed all the hungry in the world. They're asking you to make sure you contribute to the food bank. Maybe you volunteer at, the Council of Churches food bank, and they have a clothing. Do you see what I'm saying? There are things you can do. And see, the trouble is everybody did their bit. There'd be enough done.
Yeah. Ideally, your proportional bit. I mean, you do get these people. Now, is it Stephen Soros? I'm sorry, my brain as I get older. George, who is a great philanthropist and has given away just billions of dollars. They said, I know there's some of these guys who came to this agreement that they were going to try to give away most of their money before they die. But then obviously you don't have to have billions of extra dollars. It's so true. So and
there's some people with billions who don't give, and there's some people with very little that do give.
Absolutely.
But the idea is most people, in America, Americans like stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they will give only after they've gotten enough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have a young man in one of my classes who wants a fancy car. And I said, but what about giving to people? He said, well, isn't there going to be enough money for both? And I said, well, the problem is, whether any of us like it or not, no one has an infinite amount of time or an infinite amount of energy or an infinite amount of money. And any time you give to one, you don't give to something else. You have to make choices. So the issue is, that's it. I said, that's kind of basic economics, guns and butter, as Sam Houston used to say in economics. The bottom line is that you do understand when you spend it on X, you're not spending it on Y.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So there are always choices. And like I said, it's not like you have an infinite amount.
Right. Yeah.
So we all need to make choices. And I just can't see what an expensive car does for anybody. I don't understand, or designer clothes or designer purses, and I just can't figure out what they do.
Well, I mean, I guess for people who are into that sort of thing, it confers a sense of, it makes them feel important and or special or whatever, that they are keeping up with the people around them. But I mean, honestly, I'm not someone who is so given to labels. I mean, people will say that there's a certain level of quality in certain things and they last longer, but
I'm not sure that's true.
I'm not sure
think
that's
they
true
probably been brainwashed. That's what brands do. They
Yeah.
kind of convince you that somehow if you pay $100 for a pair of jeans, they fit better.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Or, people want to get, a $300 pair of shoes. I can't figure out what a $300 pair of shoes does for you. It better wake me up in the morning, run my bath, and have my breakfast ready. Those shoes better be working hard. I can't see it.
Yeah. Well, I feel you. And a lot of those shoes, what they do for you is end you up at the podiatrist, actually, faster than the other shoes that didn't cost so much. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
And I try not to buy products that are built in other people's oppression. My kids have never had Nike products. I have never owned a Nike product, and that's because, for all intents and purposes, Nike uses slave labor. They allow the women who work in their factory to be raped. They allow them to be exposed to terogens. Those are things that cause birth defects. and these women are often pregnant or at the age where you get pregnant and they work here. And my say is, I'm not supporting that. It's not about I'm not supporting anybody's depression. So mostly I don't buy name brands. And my whole viewpoint is, it means you flunked economics. And my students say, what do you mean? I said, as far as I know, if you're advertising, you're getting paid for advertising. I want to know whether you are paying more to advertise to somebody. So you must have flunked that basic economics course. Because as far as I know in my world, if you want me to advertise your stuff, you pay me.
Yeah.
I said, this stuff now is just an amazing concept. They actually have you pay more to advertise their product.
Yeah.
So you pay more for a pair of Nikes so Nike can be advertised.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that also never made sense to me. So I'll have a T-shirt that's made of the same cotton, and it's, I mean, I don't know how much more you can do with a T-shirt, and you put some particular name on it, and suddenly the price is some exorbitant amount, like, I don't know, $50 for a T-shirt that it probably costs them $2 or $1 to make or whatever. I mean, whatever you pay at, the craft store for a T-shirt. I mean, the way that we're trained.
My students get on me because I tell them, like, I don't mind them wearing Millersville stuff, and that's okay. But other than that, the only name they're going to see across my butt is Rita. I'm saying I'm not going to have some product made across. It's not happening.
Yeah.
It might be. I said I might have across my chest one of my son's names.
Sure.
Because I love my kids. But I'm not having, Adidas or Nike or what are those exclusive pocketbooks?
There are enough. I mean, the Coach makes expensive ones, or.
But I think this is Jody Vuitton. I don't even know the names of the stuff.
Okay. You know what? I have to admit I'm not into it that much. I mean, I have to say, I like. It's funny. I like looking at fashion magazines, though. It's like brain candy, and they have articles, and they have and it's like saying I read Playboy for the articles, but it's true. They do have articles, and then I look in my closet because a lot of my clothes are very old, like 20 years old or even 25 years old, and then the things come back to some extent, and then, they go when they come. So a lot of times, the trick is to still fit in the clothes, but till they're not, till I can't fit in them anymore anyway. That's kind of what I do. I kind of just do vintage, but I look in my own closet for it. But, the whole thing is obviously focused on things that are pretty trivial, and it is an industry, and there are a lot of people who work in it, and a lot of people that's their livelihood. But I think just the inflation of things and just what does it mean to have a status bag? Well, nothing really. I don't understand that mindset either. But I've been asking everybody things about the arts because, of course, that's something that I'm very involved in and very passionate in. And what would you say the arts have meant to you and or your family?
I think for me, what I like, people come in my house and they see a lot of African American art. A lot of it isn't original because that gets to be real expensive. Sometimes it upsets people. So I have a crucifixion, but it's an African American crucifixion. All the folks are African American in the scene. It's Christ coming down off the cross. Then, of course, we had one of my favorite prints, some women playing bid whist, and they just ran to Boston, and how they're steaming off, or one's on their knees getting ready to put that card down, and things like that. So it's really hard for African American artists to get supported. So I like African American art. I like African artifacts. Because if you come to my house, you see a lot of that. I even found a beautiful African Afghan with my favorite Philippians phrase. I can do through all things through He who gives me strength, but it's in an African, the African figures in it and that. So I like that kind of stuff. And the other thing I like is I'm a Motown fan. I don't know if you consider that art, but I love Motown.
It is. I do.
And I love African American theater. I've read everything by August Wilson. I'm so glad that Denzel had bought all the plays, though he says he has to go back to do some other work to have money to put on to turn them into film.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I like the fact that August Wilson said because African American directors could not get a lot of work, that in his will he said that his plays can only be directed by African Americans.
Wow.
He actually put that in his will.
Yeah.
That that's part of his estate. And it's not because he had anything against European Americans. His concept was we need a way to support our craftspeople in the arts.
Yeah.
And since I have become the premier American playwright, not black playwright, the premier American playwright, so I have a little power here. I'm going to use that power to assure that the craftspeople, African American craftspeople, have opportunity. And I think that's what it's important that we do, that we support. So I take my class to D.C. in the fall and New York in the spring, and we go to African American museums, et cetera, and so on. But also what we always go to is dinner, because I think cuisine can be an art too, at an African American restaurant. Busboys and Poets in D.C. and Sylvia's in New York. And people don't know Busboys and Poets is named for Langston Hughes, because this New York reporter went to a restaurant and met what he said was this poet-writing busboy. Our writers during Harlem Renaissance had to eat. And then we always go to an African-American play. We're going to see Nina in D.C. But we've seen The Color Purple, 3 different versions of it. We've seen Fences. I saw Fences when Denzel redid it on Broadway, when him and Viola got once again Tony, and then it got the Tony for the best, revisit of a play. Joe Turner's coming down. We take them to African American plays that are off Broadway. We need to support our arts. I even have some African American art photography. That's really good. That's not for anybody, black, white, green, or purple. Art photography, because that's not how people think of photography. It's certainly not how African Americans think of photography. As we think of photography as taking family pictures. They don't think of it as an art form. But we need to support our art.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to, because we can't necessarily depend on European Americans to, though some do. We can't. I get so mad that Temple has a jazz station, Temple University, but most of the DJs are European American because African Americans don't know the history. And these DJs can tell you not only who this is, but who's on sax in it, who's on this, where else they play. They have managed to study and keep alive the music of African Americans, which date all the way back to slavery, and who many people say is the only truly American music, and that all forms of American music really came out of some form of African American music. Do you see what I'm saying? But our students, our young people, don't know its history. You know what I mean? They don't know it. They don't know the performers. So I think it's very important to me, that these arts are supported, that knowledge of these arts. I sit in my class, I teach Intro to African American Studies, and I have students that have never read Richard Wright, who have never read Invisible Man, who don't know that Toni Morrison got a Nobel Prize for literature. And something's wrong.
I don't know if it's true, though, that this generation doesn't read, because I think they do read. Because they were saying that with the texting and all these other things. They read a lot less.
I've talked to students, and they say they were lucky if they read a novel in a whole year of high school.
So they watch TV. I guess that's or they watch streaming
things. They don't watch TV. They watch
streaming
Netflix and other kinds of stuff. And they tweet and they Instagram. So I find that one of the things is getting them to read textbooks is a problem. And even emails, they skim. because they're used to Instagram and tweet. They're not used to reading things in detail.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
They skim.
Which is a shame, because there's so much fine print. I mean, if it's going to get even worse with people reading the fine print, because we already, I think everybody skims that. But if you really don't read anything, then they can sneak all kinds of things in under.
And they complain about textbooks. Well, but that book is so big.
So you have to learn. You're supposed to be learning things. I mean, it's sort of, I don't really want to learn.
I've always loved to read. Reading just as people takes you all sorts of places, gives you all sorts of experiences. And one of my favorite things to read, I'm a sci-fi freak. And,
that's right. Yeah.
I was so happy when I found out, and I had her come here, Octavia Butler, because I didn't know there were African-American females that were in the science fiction, let alone wrote science fiction. Do you see what I'm saying? But she died of a stroke not too many years later. I'm also very proud that we were the last place August Wilson was before he died.
I had a conversation with him. It was quite surreal.
Yeah, he was really nice. He was here. We had him here 2 or 3 days. It was wonderful.
He was down to earth. He was lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, and he did that one-man show. And I tell my students that, and I tell him the story about his mother and the washing machine, and that what he learned that day is something isn't always better than nothing. If what you have to sell for that something, your dignity, your pride, your self-esteem, no, it's not better than nothing. And there's just so much wisdom that I think our kids miss because they don't read. When I told them we used to read like a novel every week and a half, they look at me like I have lost my mind. And see, I don't think they just should read Black stuff. I tell them that really to succeed in school, whether they like it or not, the 3 sets of literature they need to know. They need to know Greek and Roman mythology. They need to know Shakespeare. They don't have to like it. But they need to know it, and they need to know the Bible. There's just too many references in all disciplines to those 3 things. The word Oedipus complex doesn't make any sense if you don't know the Oedipus myth.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, I think hopefully the point is that you realize that humans, have similar emotions. The situations may be different, but good literature communicates that even though we are forced perhaps into situations or there's things that we won't experience, because no one can experience everything, and where you grow up, who you grow up around affects a lot of things. The point is to know that we are all have these common humanities and not to, just be so completely isolated. I mean, I want to see people who remind me of myself. I don't want to be in a situation where, because I grew up that way. I grew up in, as this very small minority in an overwhelmingly white environment. And I was just so happy to move to New York because I didn't feel like such an island. And then I discovered that, it wasn't a utopia either. But the fact was that, we all need.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I like people to read everything, but I do think it's important. I think people's cultures die if the members of that culture don't maintain it. And I think all cultures should be maintained. Obviously, I have a bias toward mine being maintained.
Right.
But I become very concerned that our culture, which is the arts, which is the visual arts, which is music, which is literature, which is quilts, which is
film,
cooking,
everything.
which is how you do your hair, which is things. All of these things need to be not lost.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying they're the only thing you should be a part of, but they can't be lost. And since we are not a majority in America, if we don't support them, there's a very good chance they will be lost.
Agreed.
And that people won't go into them. You see, people won't use the arts as a way of making a living day to day. And that'll be even more. So, you see what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
You stop having black artists because black artists don't think they can survive.
Right.
You have a problem.
Yeah.
So you will see black parents definitely talking their kids out of the arts, and that's horrible. Though they will talk them into football.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And really, the possibility of them making a living as a football player is much smaller. It's minute. So
and not only that,
huh?
the arts, you're probably not going to get, you're not going to have traumatic brain injury from painting or, writing.
I did not need anyone to do research to tell me shaken adult syndrome, that's what I call it. Shaken adult syndrome was not a good thing. And that humans don't protect against that. That's about your brain bouncing around inside your skull every time you get bumped or knocked.
Right, it has to be. Okay, well, let me just ask you a couple of questions more, and I appreciate all the time you've given me so far, so I don't want to keep you forever, but what do you think of when you hear the word beauty?
That's really hard. I kind of think beauty, it's so many things. I don't know if I think of one particular thing. I think all sorts of things are beauty. And I was talking to someone today about the fact that we're going to go see Nina. Mm-hmm. And that Nina Simone had a very rough time, even in her own community, because she was dark with very Afrocentric features. Do you see what I'm saying? And when the singers and the actresses at her time were very light-skinned with very European features. And I do know, I don't think that only the Western definition or the media definition of beauty is beauty. I often see that as beauty. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying it can't be beautiful, but I am saying to say it is the only aesthetic standard. I think different cultures have different, or at least they used to, until the Western decided to decide anybody. The idea is, and you may not be able to kind of put this in this way, big breasts were not beautiful in most of Asia for obvious reasons. That isn't what their women look like. So that wasn't the definition of beautiful. In Africa, what was often considered beautiful was what I call shelf behind, because that's what their women had. Do you know what I mean? So that became the sign of beauty. And I think that's perfectly okay. It makes perfect sense to me that what the majority of their women look like become a beauty standard. I think it makes perfect sense. But for one culture's definition of beauty to become every culture's definition of beauty is bad. It's very bad. Because obviously people not of that culture, very few of them are going to meet that standard. So I don't think it's ugly to have straight hair if that's what you were born with. But I also do think it's ugly to have locks or braids or an afro. I think all that is also, and one should not be seen as more beautiful than the other because somebody else has told you this is the standard of beauty. I guess beauty is that which, like Karina talks about the committed versus the detached school of art. And one of the things he talks about is he said that an aesthetic should be functional. That was one of it. And it should be committed. And that is, should inspire people towards freedom and self-identity. And it should be, as I said, functional. You know what I mean? It should serve a purpose. Now, the purpose can be to inspire you. That doesn't mean that it has to be a spoon to say that it's functional. But it should serve some purpose. And it should be committed to a community or an idea, something. And I guess then that would be something that's functional and committed would be my definition of beauty. Therefore, mean any particular group's idea of beauty is beauty. Okay?
Yep.
Beauty should make me think. Beauty
that.
should make me think and feel. It should
like that.
inspire me. That's what beauty should do.
I have one more question, I think, because, I mean, I had two, but one of them was what keeps you inspired, but I think, do you think you've already said what keeps you inspired?
I think what keeps me inspired would be, this is funny. Often I think while my students are here, they make voodoo dolls of me and stick needles in them. They just think I am the hardest, sometimes the meanest person going.
No.
I think what keeps me inspired is I'm old-fashioned, so I have a Facebook page. That's old-fashioned in these days. I know some people may not consider. And I guess what keeps me going is when someone comes back. Like I just got a student who just got her PhD in school psychology. And, she said, hey, I just finally got this. And I said, congratulations, that's wonderful. That's just so great. And she said to me, I carried you with me all the way.
Yeah.
And so when students tell me, hey, you helped me become the best I could become, or this, that, or the other, whatever that is, that's what it keeps me going. To feel that I've made a difference.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, well, yeah, that wasn't exactly the answer, but I thought, so that's why I should ask these questions. Okay, this is absolutely the last question.
Okay.
Do you think that art can change the world?
Yes, I think art can change the world depending on how you define art.
Mm-hmm.
I think the broader you define art, the more it can change the world. So I consider cooking art. I consider how people do hair art. I consider how people dress art. And sometimes people sharing, maybe I consider art and culture the same thing. And maybe that's how people might consider that art. I consider art and culture the same thing. Because I think anything that's part of people's culture is an art. And I think when people get a chance to be exposed to and understand other people's culture, when then people are given voice. And I think art, broadly defined, gives people voice. I think when people have voice, it inspires them to do what is necessary to see themselves in the community, but it also allows other people to understand in various ways. When I think of, I think it's called McKay, if we must die, let it not be, but standing tall, that might inspire activism, and I think that needs to be inspired. Or, people don't know where the term raisin in the sun comes from. Do you know what happened to a dream deferred?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? To give people do it. Or County Cullen, right, to be a poet and then to make them black. At the particular time he wrote. Do you know what I mean? He just
yet do I marvel, I think. Is that the name of the poem?
Yeah.
I guess, yet do I marvel.
Yeah, I do marvel, yeah. And just so when I think of that, or paintings that I've seen, or quilts that I've seen, do you see what I'm saying? Or hairstyles that I've seen, or the way people do a meal, I just think that can, help other people understand. It can inspire people. I just think all of that is important, especially if you understand it. So we do this thing called Cooking with Soul. And one of the African-American faculty said he hated the event because he thought it was stereotypical. So what I did was I decided that from now on when we do it, we would hand out an information sheet to say the history of how soul food developed and both its strengths and its weaknesses. Do you know what I mean? It does, and some parts of it are very nutritional, other parts too much of it, but how it developed and the different cultures it came from, and it surprised him that there could be something educational about food. Nobody thinks that French cuisine is not educational.
Right.
Why, therefore, do they think African American cuisine is not? And I'm sure, though your parents, because your parents are from the Caribbean.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying? Certainly, Caribbean cuisine is education.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's an art form. It's an art form how you do it. And I was talking to my student Carlos. He's from Ecuador, and talk about the fact that there's no such thing as Spanish food if you mean one thing. That the way a Puerto Rican makes a dish is very different than the way an Ecuadorian might make the same dish, or someone from the Dominican Republic.
Yep.
So always when people people say I like Spanish food, he goes, well, which one?
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying? What does that mean? Or, people not giving people what I call kujijakali, self-determination, by finding out how people like to be called. So my students will say, oh, yeah, I was talking to this Spanish woman. I said, no, you weren't. Yes, I was. I was talking to a Spanish woman. No, you weren't. And I said, was she from Spain? Well, no, then she's not Spanish. She's Puerto Rican, but she's not Spanish. Spanish people come from Spain. More family came from Spain. That's not, you're really talking to a Latino or a Caribbean, you know what I mean? But, but they decide that all of these people who speak Spanish are therefore Spanish. And I don't know what they think of a Brazilian. Because they speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And they wouldn't call them a Portuguese person, I'm sure. They wouldn't call them a Portuguese person. They'd say they were Brazilian.
Right. And by the way, I really am trying to get my students to be more knowledgeable of the African continent, because what has happened now is that the various people from the continent have given up. So I'll come up to someone, and I'll know they're from the continent, and I go, where are you from? They go, Africa. I said, I know you're from Africa. Africa's a continent. Yeah. But they don't say their country because they're so used to dealing with people who have no idea where those countries are. They know they're in Africa sometimes. They don't even know they're in Africa. They don't know where they are in Africa. And then, I'll meet a Nigerian, and they'll say, well, I'm from Nigeria. I'll say, oh, are you Igbo, or are you Hausa, are you Yoruba? And they just light up. Because most of them identify much more with their ethnic group than the country that some European created. And they just light up that I cared enough, that I knew this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's certainly, those are the sorts of things that if you're willing to read, outside of, you can find those things out, Well, I'm gonna let you go, and I appreciate all the time that you took.
One last thing I'm just going to say. You can keep it on tape or not. It really aggravates me that the European American students will go out of their way to learn these things, and our students will not. I'm not aggravated that the Europeans do it. I'm aggravated that the African American students won't do it. The African students feel that the African American students will ask them questions like, do you live in a hut? Decide this, that, and the other about them, and that the African students look down on the African American students, and that's because they think they have all these opportunities. And they just flip them away. And that a lot of how they see African Americans is the stereotypes that come across in the movies.
Americana, you read Americana?
No.
Oh, you didn't read Americana? Okay, no. By Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She has obviously a point of view of a Nigerian coming to America, but she has these different takes on how even, people in England and how, Nigerians who are transplants to England and Americans who are African American, and she deals with, I think, a little bit of West Indian attitudes and sort of skewers most of them in some way. But it's true that there are all these fracture lines within our community as far as misunderstandings, misconceptions, and we have. There's a lot that we have to learn about ourselves if we're willing to do so. And I don't know if there again is that legacy of slavery and that mentality of some people wanting to divorce themselves from that aspect of things, or whether there's some legacy of people who were on the continent and looking at Americans as, I mean, whatever, it all boils down to the other, but it's just a smaller version of the other in that it's not like we're looking at each other the same way that, you know, a white supremacist would look at the other, but there's this ignorance. I guess it's ignorance and then misconception and not being willing to find out what the truth is or having exposure, I guess.
To me, it must be totally devastating to come somewhere and the people that treat you worse are the ones that look like you.
Sure.
That would be devastating to me. It must be totally devastating.
Yeah.
For that to be the case. It must be, I can imagine coming here and finding the people who want to know about your culture or who want to treat you well are just horrible. Do you know Romeo?
I'd met him.
Yeah.
I didn't. I can't say I know him, but I do know him to some extent.
When he came here, he was dating an African American girl.
Yep.
He always treated the young ladies he dated wonderfully, just totally wonderfully. Very nice reception to him. And the first young lady, one that he dated, broke up with him because he said he doesn't comb his hair right. And look at how he dresses.
What? Yeah.
It's like, and Romeo would take her to dinner, to move. Romeo spent money. Do you know what I mean? Because he thought you dated people and took them out and got them gifts. That's how you treat. And this little idiot. And I told him she was an idiot. I said, this little fool. By the time she was a junior, she was so sad she had let him. This little idiot. Look at how he dressed. He doesn't seem to comb his hair right. This little idiot. That's what I called him. She was such. Do you understand? You're going to find out that what you want in a man has very little with how he combs his hair and how he dresses. Right. When you start finding out what's important, what's important in someone you have a relationship with, it's none of those things. Yeah. It is absolutely not. And he treated her with the greatest respect. I said, absolutely nothing. Yeah. None of those things really matter. You know what I mean?
They really are not the foundation of a relationship. If that is the foundation of your relationship, you're in for a rough or a short ride. But I just want to say one last thing, and then I really should wind up, which is I found that when I came here, of course, you know, my speech patterns are not stereotypically American, and my background was Canadian West Indian, which is not the same, obviously, as African American. I mean, we had in the West Indies, there was slavery, and we had, I mean, I think I probably got called the N-word more than most of the people that I met in New York. Because I don't know if people wouldn't dare to call them that, or if they were in other communities.
They didn't like it there. No, New York, people understood, even the whites in New York understood that endangered your health.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm saying when I came, I felt very different, and I mean, people, you know, I mean, there was acceptance because, you know, I was at a conservatory, so we were already kind of outside the mainstream of so-called black society, but you know.
My son complains about it all the time. You talk like you're white.
Yeah, and what is that? I mean, what am I saying? That's my thing. It's like, you know, when people judge on these things that have nothing to do with anything, are you listening to what I'm saying and what I'm talking about? If I'm talking about things that are denigrating you because you're black, or if I'm, you know, like Clarence Thomases of the world, you know, then that's one thing. Okay, what am I saying? But that to me is just, it's these silly things that we divide.
It's historically, because often blacks who got educated became snobs. They begin to distance themselves, especially at, would you believe, traditional African American schools. People ask me, why didn't I go to a Howard? Because I was not going to wear a walking suit to a football game. Do you know what I mean? And I wasn't high yellow, and my parents weren't professionals. And all of those kind of things mattered. The first time Howard had a homecoming queen with an afro, the president wouldn't crown her.
Wow.
I'm just saying, so people have had these negative experiences because of what happened here. So often light skin or more educated, and often they went together. Often that went together because who got a chance to get educated often depended on complexion because of, their relationships with the master, et cetera, and so on. And so they begin to see themselves, like if you read Du Bois's early work, The Philadelphia Negro, and how he talks about other Negroes, you will know exactly. It changed over time.
Well, no, I understand where some of that comes from. And honestly, my daughter, Kiana is 20, and at school, I mean, she would get, she was talking about something like in the group with the black kids, and she would say something to say that, it's like she understood, and say, what do you understand? Like, you're not really black. And, and both her parents are black. I mean, she, for whatever reason, is a throwback, and she's lighter skinned than either of us, but people assume that she had a white parent. Well, maybe if she had a white parent, okay, she would have had a white parent. But the thing was sort of like this whole, well, you're not really black. And she speaks more like I speak, And
but that's a Philadelphia thing.
But it's a reverse, but there's a reverse thing that
because of how they got treated. But that's the Philadelphia thing in this area, because you know what? In the South, they're used to people being light with 2 black parents, 2 black grandparents, and 2 black great-grandparents. It's just that often if white people married white people, kids came out all different colors. Like my grandparents on my mother's side, both of them were about my complexion, but my Aunt Ruby was really fairly high yellow, and my Uncle Walter was black as night. And they all had the both same parents. But up here, whenever you're light, they assume you're a mulatto. I don't know. They didn't do that in D.C., and they didn't do that in the South, and they didn't even do that in New York. But in Lancaster and Philly, they assume you're either Latino or one of your parents are white. I don't know why.
But the thing is, like, if you are saying that you understand a certain situation, or you can relate to it, or you resonate with it, I'm saying, like, who is this person to say, what do you know? You're not really black. I mean, but these are the things like these, and I know every group has problems. There's no group that has no problems, and we certainly have reason to have problems. As psychologists, if any human had been treated the way that our race was treated, yes, serious problems would result. But it's just like there are these things that you hope that you'll find as far as I said, I came from a predominantly white community, and you're going into this situation thinking that, oh, wow, black people, and then you find out that you don't talk like a black person, whatever that means. It means nothing.
There is no one-way black people talk. And
I
people
know.
don't understand that. But the issue is very much an issue that what you get stuck with, that's why they say people who don't know their history repeat its mistakes.
Yeah.
People individually and as groups carry baggage.
Yep.
And we've got to first realize this baggage.
Right.
And then we can do something about it. But half of them, if not more than half, don't realize the baggage. I keep telling my students the most important question isn't what, but why. Because you've got to understand why before you solve the problem. All they see is the what. They don't try to understand the why so we can undo it. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? If you can understand the why, you can start to undo some of it. But this is baggage. It's kind of like, and it's a group baggage and a cultural baggage that comes to the situation. It's kind of like a rape victim tends to be wary of men.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And often blacks that grew up less middle class with less opportunities have been treated badly by those that did have it. So they're like a rape victim. They assume that, they're very wary of men, and they don't expect people who have not been raped to understand what it means.
Right.
And so that's what you do, and we need to understand that so we can change it. But yeah, it hurts. Both sides have a set of baggage that comes from being victims of some members of the other set. Often, historically, not even presently. But this stuff gets passed down. It gets passed down that, you need to be wary of this group. This will mistreat you. My mother, who parents were sharecroppers and had to pick cotton, would wear stockings on her arm so she wouldn't get darker.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
She grew up in Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
And always picked on me for dating dark men and called my kids little chocolate drops.
Yeah.
So, people come with baggage.
Yes,
people
they do.
come with baggage. I didn't happen to pick up the baggage from either side, but I've seen it. I was in high school, and I was in all four honor societies, and I'd go out with somebody and go to meet their parents, and they would say, "Oh, you seem very nice, and you're very bright, and you seem like a nice young lady, but you're just too dark to date my son."
Yeah.
Because I was in D.C., where I'm not considered light at all. I'm not even considered brown. You know what I mean? The South. And they actually tell me, "I really don't want you dating my son. You're too dark."
Think of the children. Think of the children.
Yes, you gotta lighten the race.
That's really pathetic.
But understand that is what got taught them, that somehow if we could get lighter, it would all be okay.
Yeah.
The same thing with education, that somehow if we became educated, they treat us right. That hasn't happened. They don't treat us like that.
No.
They actually often treat us worse. Look at President Obama.
He popped into my head immediately. I was like, that made a difference. Yeah.
They were really upset with him. He was just too educated. Nobody was supposed to be that educated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the issue is, it took centuries to create this.
Right.
So it's going to take a while to uncreate it. I wish I could say there was a magic bullet. There isn't.
No.
And I just need us to somehow survive till we can solve these problems.
Well, listen, your example, though, of just trying to do what you can, where you can, and if everybody was inspired to do that, and to speak honestly, and which obviously you do, and and I don't mean, there's honesty, and then there's effrontery. You don't have to be affronting people, but you speak honestly, and you do what good you can to look after all aspects, whether it's there's people's spiritual or physical needs or cultural needs. And so for that reason, I'm really, really grateful that you were willing to share with me, and hopefully with other people. Hopefully as I put this out there, people will do a little bit better. I'm Maria Thompson-Corley, and thank you for listening to Finding Beauty.
The theme music for Finding Beauty is Symphony of Light, written and performed by Kiana Corley, with assistance on the cello from Allegra Banks. Rusty Banks was the producer. Right now, you're listening to Liszt's Petrarch Sonnet No. 104, performed by yours truly. You can hear the rest of it on my CD, Music from the Novel Letting Go, available on CreateSpace and Amazon. If you're interested, you can check me out at mariacorley.com or mariasworld.us. You can also find me on Twitter at Maria Corley or YouTube. My recordings are available through Albany or Amazon. My novel, Letting Go, is available on Smashwords, CreateSpace, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Or drop me a line on my site, and I'll send you a signed copy. I want to leave you with one more quote. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's the little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Desmond Tutu. Have a beautiful day.